Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. Eric, Irma is finally away. We can kind of get back to some semblance of normalcy here in our UCF football schedule, and so we're doing so with our podcast too. So, boy, it's nice to have football back for the first time in 2 weeks, isn't it?
Hey, I'm not jinxing it, all right? Until kickoff Saturday, until I get there, I'm not saying a word, man. I ain't jinxing it.
See, now you got me checking the National Hurricane Center's website to make sure that.
Oh, you were going to do that anyway. You know you love doing that stuff. You're obsessed with that stuff.
Yeah, I'm such a weather geek.
Just let me know I just need Jose to stay off the coast. I don't need any showers for the game. That's
I think you're gonna get your wish, because right now it's due. Jose is due east of the Jersey Shore. And so it's kind of hitting it's not hitting anything really, but like some of the clouds from it are hitting like New England right now. So, and those people that, up in New England, they're used to bad weather. But anyway, so, hey, we've got, like I said, we've got football to talk about this weekend. UCF is taking on Maryland. We're going to talk about all the changes in the schedule that led up to that. We have a guest this week, and it is Dave Lomonico of Terrapin Times, which is part of the Scout.com network. He's one of the leading voices covering Maryland Terrapin football. Great insight from him in this interview. I think you guys are going to enjoy that. And we'll also talk about volleyball getting a doubleheader sweep of the University of Virginia. Speaking of teams from the DMV area, we've also got we'll be catching you up on the schedule from men's soccer as well and women's soccer, because boy, all of a sudden there have been some changes to the schedule with Irma. But let's go ahead and, just a reminder to you, of course, hit us up on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We'll be having our previews of the Maryland game coming up from Brian Murphy. We'll be live blogging the game as well on Saturday, as we did with the FIU game. Went so well, we decided to keep it. We're going to do it again. And we're also going to have, by the way, Elo, you're going to be in College Park. Is that right?
That's correct. I will be in the press box. Hopefully they'll have my credential by then. That's a whole other story. But, I will be in the press box. Got
lost in the mail because of Irma. It's
evidently. It's a long story. Usually the teams that send the credentials to the team that's bringing in the visiting media, that did not occur this week for whatever reason. It's not a big deal. I've gone to a million sporting events where I've had to pick up credentials at the stadium, and I've been to that stadium before. But yes, I will be at the press box, and I will be on the field. And yes, I'll try to blog in as well with you guys from there. And I haven't decided yet at the time of this recording. This will be a game day decision. But I will be doing either a Facebook Live or a Periscope that day from the stadium, either before the game or after the game. I haven't figured it all out. The best way to find out is go to Eric Lopez Elo on Twitter and follow me there, because that's where you'll get the breaking news. And I'm sure Jeff will retweet it or share it on all social media platforms, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, we'll keep everybody posted on that, and we're trying all these different experimental things that we want to, get everybody involved. I think that the live blog was actually, for the FIU game, I thought it was pretty good. It was me and Brian, because you were working stats for that game. But now we might have all three of us. This might be our first chance to have all three of us. So, all right. Don't forget, blackandgoldbanneret.com. Don't forget our Facebook page, Black and Gold Banneret, as well. We're on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. I'm on Twitter at Jeff_Sharon. Eric is on Twitter at Eric Lopez Elo. And what else? We got, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play. By the way, brand new iTunes, by the way, if you have a new, if you haven't gotten that update, it looks really nice now. iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn is where you can download the podcast, review, send us a review. Let us know how we're doing. Don't forget to send us a question as well at blackandgoldbanneret@gmail.com. All right, let's dive in, Eric Lopez. 3 weeks between football games for UCF. Actually, more than 3 weeks, because right now UCF still undefeated at 1-0 off the defeat of FIU back in the first game, but Hurricane Irma rolls through. The Georgia Tech, the Memphis game gets initially canceled, and now it's been moved to September 30th. Just like we were predicting might be a possibility. UCF and Memphis worked out deals with Maine and Georgia State to make it so that UCF plays Memphis on September the 30th at home, 7 p.m. kick on ESPN. So it's going to be it's going to be a pretty big game in prime time that night on ESPN as well. But now UCF has to get back to football. By the way, obviously, thinking back to our last show, Georgia Tech, that game got canceled as well. No word yet on whether or not UCF is going to be able to make that one up with Georgia Tech. There was some controversy about it, which everyone obviously knows by now. We're not going to rehash that. But right now we're just getting back to football with Maryland now on the schedule. UCF, by the way, right now, I'm counting this up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games on the schedule right now. So there are some rumors about trying to get a 12th game in there. Nothing yet that we know. But UCF gets back to action Saturday, 3 o'clock in College Park, Maryland, against the Maryland Terrapins, the Big Ten Maryland Terrapins. That still doesn't even sound right when I say it. Maryland is 2-0. They've got victories against Texas, who they beat in the first game, surprisingly so, in Austin, 51-41. And then they racked up 63 on Towson in their second game. The Terrapins lost their starting quarterback. They've got their backup in there who actually put up the 63 points. But Eric, let me ask you this: we're coming off basically 3 weeks without playing a game. UCF last played Thursday, August 31st. There's always the big question on everyone's mind: rest versus rust. I don't think that after wiping up FIU with 61 points in that game, that there was much of a need for rest. So how concerned are you about the rust factor heading into this game?
Yeah, a little bit, not much. I think that gets a little overblown a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you would like to have some games under your belt a little bit, but at the same time, you're also fresh. And, maybe a couple of – I think I'm always more concerned as far as tackling is concerned. I feel tackling is where you notice if a team is a little rusty or not. I think this team – look, it is kind of like a new season in a way. But Maryland's coming off a bye week as well, and there's so it's still early enough in the season where I don't think it's a big deal. Whereas maybe if this would have occurred in the middle or towards the second half of the season, and you're now all of a sudden missing 2 or 3 weeks, and we've seen this with bowl games, that's where I would be more concerned. But I think it's still early enough in the season where I don't think it will be as big of a factor.
A little bit of a familiarity factor between these two squads. Of course, they met last year, which was Mackenzie Milton's first career start. This game was at then Bright House Network Stadium, now Spectrum Stadium, of course. Maryland with that 30-24 double overtime victory where we were like, you know what, it was another good effort, but came up a little bit short, but the future certainly seemed bright. Maryland more or less outlasted UCF in that game. A couple mistakes by the true freshman quarterback, Milton, resulted, basically ended up with the result. But different situation now on the road. This is the first road game of the season. Comes against a Big Ten opponent. I'm interested to see how McKenzie is going to look this time around. Obviously playing the same defense coach by DJ Durkin, the head coach over at Maryland now. How much of a familiarity factor is it, do you think, between these two squads now based on that one game last year? Because these are two teams that are in pretty similar places right now with their head coaches, right?
They are. I don't know about how much you take into last year. Certainly from game film, there's some of that familiarity from a system standpoint. But, that was Mackenzie Milton's first ever collegiate start. I think he's a different quarterback than he was back then. And Maryland's different a little bit as well. So I think you use it from a scheme standpoint and you kind of know what they're running. But I wouldn't go too crazy over it. Over that, I think it's good that they'll be on the road. It's the first road game. I can tell you, having been up there, and I was up there in 2013 when Maryland played FIU. As a matter of fact, I was visiting family. That was the year, if you remember, UCF opened the season on a Thursday night against Akron. So then I flew up. I caught the Maryland FIU game, who was UCF's next opponent. Remember, the following week, UCF that year played at FIU. So not an intimidating place. They don't pack the house, and I know we're going to have a guest on shortly to talk more about it, but Maryland is not a traditional football program. It's more of a basketball school, in my opinion, and they don't draw big. I mean, you can get good tickets. I remember when I went to the FIU game, I kid you not, on game day, I got tickets right behind the Maryland bench for about $5. So,
wow.
Yeah. And you could probably get similar seats, to be honest, for this game as well. So if you're making late plans, you can do that. So I don't know if it's not going to be a hostile environment, in my opinion, from that standpoint. It'll be good, and I think it's a good first road game for this team to get on and start and have familiarity with who they played. A lot of the players on the roster played against the roster on Maryland, so I think that's a good comfort level. And I think it's a good test, by the way, with all the schedule changes. It's a good test to get them ready for Memphis, who's obviously a dynamic offense, as we saw against UCLA. Whereas, before the original schedule was you're going to have to play Memphis, then Maryland. I had some concerns about, going from Memphis to Maryland. Mm-hmm. I think this team is fresh and opportunity and can work on some things that'll help them for Memphis. So it'll be interesting to see how they get off to a good start, how quickly they can get off to a good start. And remember, turnovers was what cost them the Maryland game. You could argue they outplayed Maryland last year if it wasn't for the turnovers.
I thought we did outplay Maryland last year and lost the game because of the turnovers. The game should have been over in regulation.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, well, that's
wow. Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah, that's the truth. But that's the result that we get. But as far as this game is concerned, right here, we by the way, let's get to our guest for the day. He is the publisher of Terrapin Times, which is part of Scout.com. It's one of the leading, if not the leading source for University of Maryland football, and really sports in general for the University of Maryland. Dave Lomonico joined us a little bit earlier to talk about Maryland, give sort of the lay of the land of the Terrapins so that you can get ready for the game, which, by the way, is scheduled for a 3 p.m. kickoff in College Park, and the game will be televised on FS1, Fox Sports 1, as well. So here is our interview with Terrapin Times' Dave Lomonico. All right, welcome, Dave Lomonico, Terrapin Times. How are you, Dave? Is it starting to feel like fall up in the DMV right now, or what?
A little bit. Actually, to tell you the truth, we're getting a little bit of a heat wave up here, a little bit different from what's been going on down in Florida. So we're getting one last burst of summer, and it's going to be it might be 85 degrees on game day. So we might have a hot one up here before the fall actually hits. But it's great to be on, Jeff. Thanks for including me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for coming on board the Black and Gold Banneret podcast here. And boy, 85 degrees and humid in Washington D.C. sounds like home for UCF. But let's talk Terrapin football right now. You guys right now are 2-0. Got that big win over Texas in the opening weekend, which raised everybody's eyebrows in Austin. Then you coming off of a 63-17 wipeout of Towson, which was pretty I guess pretty much expected. But wow, 114 points in your first 2 games for the Terrapins. Is this pretty much what what the folks in Maryland expected from the Terrapins this year, or is it beyond expectations?
Yeah, really exceeded expectations. Expectations here. I mean, the feeling was that Texas, with a new coach under Tom Herman, they were going to be motivated. They're playing at home. They got something to prove. And there's a lot of people that thought, even if Maryland was better than last year, they're going to go in there, they're going to lose by several touchdowns. And they just hung with them, and they just kept putting up points, and they're just gaining confidence. Even when their quarterback goes down, Tyrell Pigrom, who was the starter as a sophomore, goes down with an injury, and the freshman, Kasim Hill, comes in and completes 6 straight passes and orchestrates a touchdown drive. And they just we're sitting there with our mouths open almost, and coming out with that big victory. And then we're thinking, okay, they're going to beat Towson, but maybe there's a little bit of a letdown. So maybe they struggle a little bit in certain areas because it's Towson. Not a bad team, but it's an FCS team, and they come up and they took care of business and put up 61 points, or 67 points. So right now they're rolling, they're looking good, and we'll see if they can continue.
Obviously, the big question is the injury at the quarterback position. What's kind of been the thought process here moving forward on and overall health going into this game?
Yeah. Well, to tell you quite honestly, and I had addressed this before, the feeling was that the freshman Hill was going to take over the starting spot at some point this season, whether it would be 4. We put the over-under at about 4 games into the season. I don't think that the head coach, DJ Durkin, wanted to throw Kasim right into the fire as a true freshman. He didn't enroll earlier. I mean, he did study the playbook and things like that, but it's not like he enrolled early. He got there when everybody else got there in the summer. So they didn't want to throw him to the wolves right away, game 1 against Texas. And Pigrom had played. He'd started some last year, not the most accurate thrower, more of an athlete type. Many projected that he'd be a slot receiver, and that's why they figured that the pure quarterback, the pure signal caller, Hill, would eventually take over. So it was just a little bit sooner than expected, when Pigrom goes down with the ACL injury, which was, he's a good kid. It was a shame for him, but Hill was supposed to be the starter at some point. And really he's done almost what was expected of him. He was a 4-star Under Armour All-American coming in to Maryland. I'd seen him play several times at St. John's right in D.C. Was probably one of the most poised signal callers that I've seen, that I've scouted in this area. And, the movement just doesn't get too big for him. He doesn't act like a true freshman. I mean, he'll get knocked down. He might make a couple bad decisions, but he just moves on to the next play. It's always about the next play. Even if he throws like a touchdown pass or has a big play, it's just always, okay, walk up to the line of scrimmage, next play. So that's the kind of demeanor he has, and that's why Maryland's so confident with him. And there hasn't really been any panic even among the coaching staff or anything, or among the players with having Kasim Hill under center.
Dave, are there concerns about Maryland's defense because of the fact that they, when you look at it, they did give up 41 to Texas. 17 to Towson, okay, but everyone always focuses on the offensive side of the ball. What about the defensive side of the ball? Are there some concerns right now? There was last year. Maryland had one of the worst rush defenses in all of college football. They allowed almost 5 yards of carry. It was, linebackers playing back on their heels, guys just getting blown off the ball, especially against some of the bigger Big Ten teams. It's been actually better this year. And so any type of, so Maryland's their defense is not at the level of like an Ohio State or a Penn State or a Michigan right now, but it's markedly better than it was last year. Last year, it just wasn't good. At all. And they've blown a couple coverages. Even against Towson, they blew some coverages. That could be a problem that obviously UCF's offensive attack could take advantage of. There's a couple question marks in the secondary, but compared to last year, they've made improvements. In terms of, the linebackers and they're playing more downhill. They've generated a push so far up front. They had, obviously Texas put up 41 points. There was some blown coverage. A lot of that was, there was some special teams errors, some offense putting out turnovers that put them in a bad position. But overall, the defense has improved since last year.
I want to ask you about DJ Durkin. This is his second season. There's a lot of parallels from between UCF and Maryland from that standpoint. Scott Frost is in his second season. Both coaches trying to kind of build these programs up. What's been kind of the thoughts on DJ Durkin here now, a year and 2 games into the second season, from Terrapin fans and just from what you see?
Yeah, people love him. I mean, honestly, the guy's he's done everything they've asked him more. He's come in and he delivered what the last coaching regime couldn't do. Basically, he came in here from Michigan with the mentality like, okay, this is how you build a winning program, and this is how you recruit. This is how you appeal to the fan base. This is how you get people excited. And he's delivered on all that. He had a keen sense of the area, the DMV, and how to go about it. The DMV is sort of a special area in terms of the recruits around there. They haven't always trusted Maryland in a way, but DJ Durkin, Maryland's almost like a sleeping giant type of deal, because if you can lock down the DMV in recruiting, you can have some success. There's a lot of good players. A lot of the best, some of the highest touted players in college football have come out of the DC, Northern Virginia, and Maryland area. And so Durkin came in, and he immediately appealed to those high school coaches. He brought in ace recruiters, and immediately the talent was picked up, and fans could see that. They could see these were guys that were making plays. They were no longer getting beat by 2 or 3 steps. They were, they were forcing turnovers. They were ripping off 50-yard runs, and that excites the fan base when you see things like that. And so they've seen the progress that he's been able to make in just a year and a half, 2 years.
Boy, sleeping giant school in a major metropolitan area. Boy, we've heard that term before around here too. So now let me ask you about Maryland in general. I'll be honest with you. I'm a loyal little with the Tony Kornheiser show, and so I kind of get like a little bit more DC related sports news than probably the average person that lives south of the Mason-Dixon line. But usually when Maryland makes the news in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, it's mostly because of, wow, look at Maryland, they're getting slaughtered in the Big Ten. But now I think that are they starting to make a dent into that crowded DC area media attention scope now that, like I said, DJ Durkin 2-0 and Big Ten schedule coming up right around the corner?
Yeah, it's going to take more than 7-6, 8-4 bowl season or something like that around, especially in this area. The loyal fan, obviously there's more excitement. We see it on our website. There's more traffic. People are coming on, but there was barely 35,000 for the first home game against Towson. The UCF game, they're going to be lucky to get 40,000 people. It's a transient area. You hate to say it, but there are a large number of fair weather fans in the area, just because of the amount of things. This isn't Ohio State. This isn't the middle of Nebraska where there's nothing else to do. There's Redskins, there's Ravens, there's Orioles, there's Nats, and then there's and then DC itself is a transient area, so you don't. There's not,
Yeah.
It's not a lot of loyal fans in one place that are going to stick with you thick and thin. You got to show them something. So yeah, there's some excitement, there's some buzz, but for them to fill Maryland Stadium and College Park again, it's going to take beating Michigan, beating Ohio State, and of course beating Penn State, which Maryland fans view as a rival, and Penn State really doesn't. But that's a story for another day. And it's going to take knocking off those teams, being ranked for a while, and putting together a couple consecutive, significant winning seasons for them to really take hold again.
Let me expand on that because this will be my second trip to a Maryland football game, actually at Maryland. I made a trip back in, I think it was Labor Day weekend of 2013. Maryland opened the season against FIU. I believe that was the Stephon Diggs year. with Randy Etzo at head coach and everything, and they beat FIU. And I remember that was right around the time where Maryland had just joined the Big Ten. And talking to people there, I got the sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that more people are more excited and care more about the basketball program. I took it as they're a basketball school. So how big of a factor is that it's really more of a basketball school, and in football it's kind of like, well, we do, that's great, but it's a basketball school.
I mean, it is a basketball school right now. I mean, as much as, but the feeling is that they could have the Michigan State model, where Michigan State was basketball, and then they come in, and then for the last decade, they've slowly built it up with, competing for second-tier prospects with Michigan and Ohio State, great coaching. They put together consecutive winning seasons. Stockton got to close to some major bowl victories, and Michigan State is now a basketball and a football school. And they were primarily a basketball school before the 2000s. And the feeling is that Maryland could go off that same model, where maybe they're going to lose recruits to Ohio State that becomes in cherry picks. Maybe they're going to lose top recruits to Penn State, which loves to. James Franklin was a former coach at Maryland. He loves to cherry pick and take kids away that Maryland wants. That's like his thing. And maybe they're going to lose kids to that, but they can get enough solid second-tier prospects and then supplement them with top-tier prospects where they could build a winning program and become both. It's going to take several years, though. But, there's no doubt that fans right now, Maryland has always done better in basketball. And, they'll get excited. They'll come out and pack the house for basketball games. That is true.
One interesting note, and then as well, is I mentioned at the time when I went up there for that game, it was Maryland had just joined the Big Ten Conference. And I know that was a lot of controversy in talking to people because there's a lot of history with the ACC and basketball. Obviously, the famous alum, Scott Van Pelt, has been all that. How has the transition gone to the Big Ten? We know why they moved from a financial standpoint, and we would assume that that's working out well. Is it working out well from an on-the-field standpoint, as you see, from a recruiting standpoint, and from a fan interest standpoint?
Oh yeah, I think most people are pretty much over that now that you talk to. There's there's a few hangers on that still. It's not even really a discussion anymore. It's been maybe basketball-wise, you'd love to still have those same those. You miss playing Duke, you miss playing North Carolina. Which were always great games. But at the same time, a lot of basketball fans are thinking, well, Duke and North Carolina sort of, they sort of had the conference, excuse my French, would buy the balls a little bit. all the ACC tournaments are down in Greensboro most of the time. And it's like fans are thinking, well, you know what, maybe it's better that they establish new rivalries where, the Big Ten tournament moves around to different cities year after year. And then, get more of a fair shot against these things. Maryland's pretty much been at the top of the Big Ten in basketball since they've been there. So, and they're starting to form rivalries there, and fans are getting on board with that. With Michigan State, Ohio State, that they're starting to form some good battles there. And then football-wise, it's going to be a little bit tougher. Just competing with schools like with Michigan, Ohio State, just because it's harder to recruit linemen, which is they're not as much in abundance in the DMV, and the best ones get cherry picked by the best schools. So it's hard to build up depth there. They're starting to get there, but when you have a team like Michigan that can trot out their second and third stringers, would maybe be starting at Maryland like a year ago. It's harder to do that just because that's how those programs are built. They're built on, we're going to beat you in the trenches and we're going to wear you down. Maybe you can hang with us for a quarter or a half, but in the third and fourth quarter, when we start rolling out our second and third string offensive linemen, we're going to wear you down. And that's going to be tough to sort of scale that to get to that level. But they're climbing up to be in the middle of that Big Ten pack, which is where Maryland can be. And then, the feeling is you sit in the middle of that Big Ten pack, and then maybe in a given year, every couple of years, maybe you shock some people and you get to the top of that conference. So that's sort of the feeling that maybe Maryland could do that right now.
Last question for you, Dave. All right, I'm a UCF fan. I'm coming to College Park for the game. I know all the sights and sounds in D.C. that I can check out, but give us a little bit of the local flavor. What are 2 or 3 places that if I'm a fan coming in from out of town that I should check out before I head over to the game on Saturday?
Yeah, right. Route 1 is the big road leading into College Park, and it's just filled with bars and restaurants. Bentley's is a famous one. Obviously it was the first ever Lido Pizza, which is the famous the famous pizza joint right there. Looney's is a big bar right there next to campus that people and the fans like to go to. There's a lot of cool spots. You can't go wrong. It's right there because right there on Route 1, right outside the campus, and the stadium is right on campus, so it's walking distance. So basically, you go grab a drink or a bite to eat, and then you walk over to the game. And that's pretty much it's not like some places where the stadium sits like 2 or 3 miles away. It's Maryland Stadium is smack dab in the middle of campus. So pretty cool place, and fans should if they're around and coming up.
Cool stuff. Dave Lomonico, Terrapin Times. Dave, how can people get in touch with you?
We're at Twitter is at MD Terrapin Times, and we tweet everything Maryland news, 24/7 pretty much. Covers recruiting, a lot of recruiting, a lot of team coverage, and pretty much it.
All right, Dave, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and hey, enjoy the game on Saturday.
Yeah, looking forward to having you guys.
All right, thanks again to Dave and all the folks at Terrapin Times for their help as well, getting us ready for this game. Again, 3 p.m. kick on FS1 if you're watching the game at home. Pretty big television audience as well.
And by the way, you want to know who's the broadcast crew?
Okay, who you got?
Some familiar faces. Eric Collins is the play-by-play guy. Eric Collins has been on various networks, Big Ten Network, ESPN, CBS Sports Network. Does a lot of softball, which
no wonder you.
Yeah. So I might have to visit him and talk a little softball shop. But that's all the story. AJ Hawk, former linebacker,
Hawk, really?
He's part of this broadcast, as is Danny Cannell, who's now at Fox Sports 1.
So it's a 3-man booth with A.J. Hawk and Danny Cannell.
I don't know if it's a 3-man booth or if A.J. Hawk's doing sideline. I would assume it's some combination of that. I mean, even if A.J. Hawk's on the sideline, I'm sure he has input in the broadcast.
Like a field analyst, right?
Yeah, like they do with Tony Saragusa, and there's other analysts. They've done that at Fox Sports 1. So that's the crew that will be calling this UCF Maryland game, by the way. So Danny Cannell. And if you remember, UCF fans might remember, the famous game Danny Cannell called for UCF on ESPN?
I know he's done more than a few. Which one are you talking about?
He was on the broadcast for that Friday night win comeback at Louisville.
That's right. That's right.
And the reason I remember that is because I interviewed him that week to preview that game. At the time, I was filling in on the Sports Talk morning show for 1080 and 1040, and I had him on there. And then I actually was filling in on the show Tuck and O'Neill that Friday because Jerry was in Louisville and Mike Tuck was out of town. So I was filling in as the host, and I re-aired that interview on that show as well to prepare for the Louisville game. So that's one of my favorite memories of my career is a chance to talk to Danny Cannell. And I'm happy from a personal note that he's back. First of all, around college football, I thought he was fantastic at ESPN. I was disappointed when he got laid off from ESPN. I thought he was tremendous as a game analyst and in the studio analyst as he was doing. And he was just doing the national radio show with Ryan Russillo.
Yeah, he was an underrated radio host, I thought. Danny was.
Absolutely. Great guy, genuine guy. When I talk to him, he's very easygoing, very approachable.
Florida State Seminole, of course, backed up Charlie Ward and then, later got his chance.
And
that's
in the NFL.
That's your fan connection with him. And then my fan connection with him is that he was the Giants quarterback for a few years.
Yeah.
In fact, led the Giants, I think, to a really successful season under an unexpectedly successful season under Jim Fossil. I think they went 10-5-1 in 1996 or 7, somewhere around there, and it was Danny Cannell who led them to that to the playoffs that year. So good to have Danny back in football.
That was back when the New York Giants actually had an offensive line and competent coaching, which they don't have at the present. But that's a whole other story.
Well, Jim Fossil was the head coach. Are we sure we're going to go in with competent at that point?
I don't know if there's much going on. But that's a whole other episode. But yeah, Danny Cannell, South Florida guy as well. So just a personal note, excited to see him there, and hopefully some good karma there, because as I mentioned, he was part of that telecast, that Friday night game against Louisville. I want to say it was with Carter Blackburn. I don't remember because you and I were actually together.
Right, we were at the Oviedo Ale House watching that game.
Correct. So, I don't recall who called the game. I have it somewhere on tape. But Danny was a part of that, and that was a blast. So I'm happy he'll be doing that. Hopefully bring some karma to this game, because I do think it's a very important game. Look, this is quietly a sneaky good game. Maryland is a pretty good team. I think improved DJ Durkin in his second season. They beat Texas, and you saw, and a lot of people overreacted to that game. And Texas struggles, but Texas, as you saw, gave USC all they can handle. Maryland's got some improved athletes there.
Yeah.
Last year's game, say what you will with the turnovers and all that. I thought that was a really interesting game. I thought it was a close game, and I expect another close game this weekend. And I think we'll learn a lot about UCF football in 2017, I think, after this game, and what we might be foreshadowing for the rest of the season.
Yeah, this is going to be I think it's going to be a real acid test for Scott Frost in terms of his ability as a head coach, dealing with this unexpected wrench that's been thrown into the first part of the season with Hurricane Irma. And by the way, that's a good segue right now, so we can kind of put a bow on the Irma situation. So, like we said before, in case you don't know by now, last place we left off was UCF was basically down 2 home games, the Georgia Tech game and the Memphis game, and people were freaking out about it. But we had said, and going back to what Andy Seeley had told us in that interview that we had last week that I conducted from my from the guest room in my in-laws, for which I'm very thankful for, that, hey, just a little bit of patience, everybody. Just hang tight. We're working on it. We're not gonna hang our fans out to dry. And lo and behold, we're right. All right. UCF was able to reschedule that game with Memphis, and they're trying reportedly. There are several reports out there, but they're trying to get that obviously, Georgia Tech is not going to reschedule this year, which stinks. We get it. But they are trying to reschedule an FCS opponent into what is currently the bye week, which is scheduled for that weekend of October the 28th, which is after the Navy game, before the SMU game. All right? To try and get, basically what the fans paid for, which was 12 12 regular season games, but also the 7 home games. All right, and that's really the key. So, your thoughts, Eric, on how UCF has handled this to this point? Because there's still a lot of controversy. There's still a lot of gnashing of teeth, and which I understand. I can have this we can have this conversation till we're blue in the face. We did last time around about guys, let's just keep some perspective and keep a little faith in here. It's not like, they're going to do the best that they can with what they've got. But, I was pretty encouraged by how quickly they were able to schedule the game with Memphis. And by the way, that was not cheap, what they had to do, the strings that both UCF and Memphis had to pull in order to make that happen, right?
Do I get partial credit for that? Since that was my first, that was the idea I brought up. September
I'll give
30th.
it to you.
Remember that?
I got no problem giving that to you.
I was the one that said it. That if that were to make it happen, they could do it September 30th. The big key was going to be buying out Georgia State, and who knew if that was going to happen or not, and it did. And give the American Conference credit. Once you saw the news come out that they had shuffled the schedule a little bit to add that USF Connecticut game that was lost, I felt pretty confident that somehow, somewhere, UCF Memphis was going to get added, and it did. And the great thing about UCF, it really didn't alter the schedule that much. You're playing a game now on September 30th, but you had a home game anyway on September 30th against Maine. And as you mentioned earlier, they're probably going to try to add an FCS opponent on October 28th. I would be surprised at this point if it wasn't added. There's been speculation on who that team is. I'm not going to get into that. But I think overall, if they get that FCS game on October 28th, and Scott Frost has talked about it this week about, hey, look, if that's what it takes, we'll play without the bye. That's not a big deal. That means they would have gotten 6 home games, and you would have an 11-game schedule. Yes, you lose Georgia Tech, but again, seriously, guys, it's Georgia Tech. Let's not lose. It's not Georgia.
Non-conference game. It doesn't really. Yeah.
You can speak to this. You worked in Georgia. Nobody cares about Georgia Tech. Like, seriously, who cares about Georgia? Like, seriously, Georgia Tech, with all due respect, get over it. Like, and Paul Johnson, shame on you for trying to jump in there and say, well, we offered to flip the schedule.
See, that right there, I want us to talk about that. That pissed me off as a fan, is hearing Paul Johnson come out and say, we offered to try it, but they said no. I was like, whoa, wait a second. Now you're just talking off the top of your head, which Paul Johnson, by the way, is known for kind of shooting off the mouth when he shouldn't. And I was interested to see Coach Frost's reaction to that, because Scott Frost, we understand now he's a pretty even keeled chap, right? He's not going to get too far up or down about anything. But he came out and said something I thought that was pretty interesting. He said, Paul Johnson knows better than to say something like that. And I was like, whoa, okay. All right, so, Scott Frost is getting a little ticked off, and I can understand where he's coming from about that, right?
Yeah, that was, you knew that game was the issue was not about flipping the game to another location. The issue was that the team was not together, the lack of practice time, which I know people don't try to downplay that, but talk to any coach anywhere, Google it. I don't care what you want. Coaches, they want a full week of practice for the triple option. It's not an offense you see every time. So if you're down all of a sudden to maybe 1 or 2 practices, you're not going to be successful. So there was just a lot of variables that just wasn't in the cards. And now credit former UCF athletic director and current Georgia Tech athletic director Todd Stansbury has been more sympathetic, and I actually believe that this will get scheduled down the road in the future. I think they'll make that game up down the road. Right. Whether Paul Johnson's the head coach by then or not, quite frankly, might actually be better off if he's not. And quite frankly, if he doesn't win enough games this year, there will be a new head coach at Georgia Tech. So he better worry about that than worried about UCF and things like that. So I think all things considered, the Memphis game's more important anyway. I could argue that Memphis is better than Georgia Tech anyway this year. And I think you saw that how they beat UCLA with Ferguson at quarterback. So you get your 6 home games. Yes, you lose the 7th. But this was the first year they've done 7 home games in a while, or if any. And I'm sure the whole ticket situation will get sorted out. And it'll get sorted out, whatever happens. So I think all things considered, I think they're fine, and everything is still in front of them. And that's the important thing. And, look, Miami was in the same boat. Miami let go of their players. They're practicing as we record this in Orlando. They can't even practice in Miami.
Yeah.
So that's why they couldn't play Arkansas State, and shame on the Arkansas State people for trying to suggest Miami was ducking them. And Rick Neuheisel, really disappointing.
Really?
That ridiculous
Arkansas
comment.
State is going to come out and say that Miami is trying to duck them. Yeah, Miami is cowering in fear of playing Arkansas State. Okay.
I encourage people, go to ESPN.com. Andrea Adelson is a friend of mine. Andrea Adelson, Killian alum. Me and her were in the same high school in Killian down in Miami, worked in the same student paper in high school. Obviously, she's had a lot better success than I have, rightfully so. Did a piece on how all the schools in the state had to deal with hurricane and the obstacles with that. And one other thing was Miami. They knew that in fact, they even told the ACC when they talked to John Swofford after the Arkansas State cancellations, like, hey, we're not going to be able to play this Florida State game more than likely because we got we don't know what we're coming back to and everything. And they sorted it out and they pushed it back. But my point is on all that is, Miami can't even practice down in Miami right now. So I think all things considered, I think we're in a pretty fortunate situation, and UCF's helped I think has helped the community and the state too by hosting the troops. So I think there was a lot of
National Guard, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and having the National Guards to host and everything, and the state government. So that was good to see that they're a part of the healing process and the helping process that I think is a lot more important, whether you play against a Georgia Tech team that's probably going to go 6-5 if they're lucky, or 7-4.
Yeah, well, I like I said before, there's some perspective that is desperately needed at this point. I'm right now, I think that, once you get into football right now, I think that, all that stuff kind of goes away.
Done.
It's
done.
It's all done. It's all said and done with. And I think that, like I said, we're good for trying to get some of that stuff back right now. By the way, Maryland, a 3.5-point favorite for this game coming up. Over-under is 59.5.
Well, it tells you it's more of a pick'em game because usually the home teams are given 3 points right away. So usually a home team is favored by 3. So the fact that it's at 3.5 tells you that, this game is kind of it's kind of a toss-up game, and I agree with that. So, that's interesting, the spread there.
Yeah. So, again, 3:00 Saturday, and it will take place in College Park, and that's on FS1, UCF against Maryland. Knights trying to go 2-0 on the season. Real quick, let's go around the American, and I wanted to bring up some of the other games that we're going to be keeping an eye on for this week here. We got some Thursday night action in Tampa. USF is playing Temple, so that's a pretty big game right off the bat to start off the week. Saturday, couple noon. By the way, that game's on ESPN on Thursday, USF and Temple, so you can check that out. Saturday at noon, before our game with Maryland, Houston takes on Texas Tech at home. That's going to be on ABC or ESPN2. Check your local listings on that. Tulane faces Army at home in New Orleans at noon. That game is going to be on CBS Sports Network. No, not across from us. At 1:30 Eastern, ESPN3, Tulsa faces New Mexico in Tulsa. Conference game, Navy and Cincinnati. That's at 3:30 across from our game against Maryland. That's on CBS Sports Network as well. And then a couple of ESPN3 games. SMU's at home against Arkansas State. And Memphis is at home against Southern Illinois. Again, those are ESPN3, 7 and 8 o'clock respectively. And we have a Sunday game because of the schedule that was rearranged. UConn will face East Carolina in Hartford noon on Sunday on ESPNU. Noon Sunday, ESPNU. I
have the story on that, by the way.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead and recount the story of that, because this is interesting.
Because I was thrown off. I'm like, why is this game on Sunday? Because both teams play last Saturday. It's not like, and I'm thinking to myself, well, why is this game on Sunday? And it turns out, as I looked into it, the reason the game's on Sunday is because where UConn plays their football home games, that's being used on Saturday for an MLS game. New York City FC is hosting an MLS game. I believe it's against Houston. So they're hosting them on Saturday because New York City FC can't host the game that they normally play at Yankee Stadium for some reason, because the Yankees supposedly now have a makeup game on Monday. And I guess the Yankees don't want a soccer match to be played on the field because I guess of the turnaround, because the Yankees are actually on the road at Toronto. Maybe you can help me with this, Jeff, since you're a Yankee guy. The Yankees are on the road at Toronto this weekend, but yet they don't want the soccer match to be played on Saturday at Yankee Stadium, because now what was originally a day off on Monday, now the Yankees have to host a game against the Royals, which was a makeup date for a rainout earlier in the year. Is that because of the field and they need like more than a day or two to kind of fix the field? Or what's that about? Because that was the part that threw me off, is like, because when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, well, the Yankees must be at home. But no, they're on the road, but yet they can't play there for some reason.
It does take a little extra time in Yankee Stadium for them to actually work on that field, because Yankee Stadium is actually not designed as a multi-purpose stadium. And remember, like you said, NYCFC, they actually play their home games at Yankee Stadium. They're able to work things out with the Yankees where they can have an extra day to actually and their NYCFC's home schedule is usually loaded toward the beginning of the season. But in the case of the Yankees, right now they're second in the AL East, and they're fighting to stay ahead of that wild card pace. And the Yankees kind of own the roost there, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, NYCFC, they're partially owned by the Yankees. I think I think
so. I think it's either ownership or some business deal. Yeah, there's definitely a partnership there of some sort, if not ownership. Yeah,
right. Oh, yeah, they are owned by they're owned by 20% owned by Yankee Global Enterprises, which just sounds awesome. So yeah, that's it's a 20% stake. So yeah, they have say over that. So. But it's funny how that all kind of cascades down and ends up affecting the UConn football game and pushing them to Sunday on ESPNU, where if you want to watch college football on Sunday, hey, go ahead. But yeah. So
it's better than watching. Honestly, it's better than watching the Giants football right now. New York Giants.
I can't disagree. I can't disagree right now. We haven't scored 20 points in a game since before the election. So.
Well, let me ask you real quick. And I've been kidding. I'm teasing you a lot, obviously, because people don't know. Jeff's a big diehard Giant fan.
Yeah.
Did you go to camp? Because I remember you visited up north.
I did. I visited the camp. I saw Brandon Marshall. I saw Eli Manning.
Cursed? Is he a curse? Because
no. The problem is the Giants are poorly coached.
Well, it's just interesting. He's never made the playoffs. Any team he's gone to. And he hasn't played well. I mean, he's dropped. He's got some drops.
He dropped a big third down. He admitted it after the game the other day. Like, I've had a big catch that he missed.
It's just crazy because, going into the season, I'm like, this might be his best shot to make the play. Look, it's early in the NFL season, but, I thought this might be maybe his best shot to make the playoffs. It's probably the best quarterback he's played with in his career. And they just, it's been brutal to watch.
Let me put it this way. If the Giants miss the playoffs this year, which is day by day looking like an increasing possibility, probably the last person I'm going to blame is Brandon Marshall. Okay?
No, that's fair. It's just
it's not going to be Brandon Marshall's fault that the Giants missed the playoffs. It's going to be Ben McAdoo's fault. That's who the fault lies with.
Well, that's fine. It's just not going to help his cause of making the playoffs for the first time in his career. And that's kind of the disappointing thing. It's part of a very bizarre, slow start for a lot of UCF alums. Latavius Murray right now is kind of out of the picture in Minnesota with Dalvin Cook. Murray didn't even get a carry in the Pittsburgh loss this past weekend. Or my boy, Brashad Perriman didn't make a catch against Cleveland. So, we got some on the positive note. We did have McCray brothers starting on Sunday night.
Yeah, Justin McCray got a start for Green Bay. They lost to Atlanta, but actually I thought held his own in that game.
Did well.
And what do you call it? I did see got some high praise from Collinsworth in that game. Yeah. Did you hear that?
Yeah, Collinsworth liked them, and they did very well. You're absolutely correct on that. So that was a positive, but hopefully we can get some of the other guys get going there from an alumni standpoint. Certainly Bouye is playing well at Jacksonville. Blake had a tough game against Tennessee from that standpoint. So
they're just trying to keep the ball away from him at this point. Just give the ball to Leonard Fournette and not ask Blake to make any plays. That's what they're doing right now. So.
It's true. But hopefully Brannick and the Giants could get it going at least. And start with, blocking somebody. It might be a good start.
All right. So let's take a quick breather. And when we get back from this timeout, we'll take a look at the, obviously football, not the only thing that got affected by Irma. We're going to update you on the schedule for all of UCF's other sports as well when we get back. And we got a little volleyball news as well. So stick around. Black and Gold Banneret podcast is back after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret podcast.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. And by the way, thanks again to we're going to keep up with our UCF fantasy thing with Andrew and Trace. By the way, we're keeping our rosters.
Listen. Let's just address this. All right.
Okay. So now you're going to stir the pot again. All right. Go ahead.
Andrew and Trace, I did look into it. No, they weren't directly involved with the cancellations for Georgia Tech and Maryland, but they weren't opposed to it because that's less weeks they lose. So they're still only down 1-0. They still can't get over they really, I'm offended, attacking me because I was the official stats guy for CBS Sports Network for the FIU game. So they're making that as the scapegoat. Well, I'm not doing the stats this weekend, so I can't wait to see what excuse they come up with when they lose again. So I'm just saying.
Listen,
if
you can't fake math. All right?
That's right.
You can't fake math. I don't want to hear it. Any of you guys. All right. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. You can follow that on as well. UCF Fantasy is the hashtag that we're using for that with Andrew and Trace. And hey, game number 2 coming up. All right. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, UCF_Banneret. Follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. Follow me at Jeff_Sharon. Hit us up on Facebook, and also follow this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Elo, the football schedule wasn't the only schedule that got completely messed up by Hurricane Irma. Let's talk about soccer. The men's soccer team coming off of a scoreless draw against West Virginia on September the 9th on Saturday. They stayed in Morgantown while the storm passed through. They were scheduled to play FIU on Tuesday, September the 12th at home. That would have been Coach Calabrese's home opener. That got canceled. So UCF has not played a home regular season game yet in men's soccer. Can you believe that? And they still have now. They're coming off of a Tuesday night loss down in Fort Myers at Florida Gulf Coast, 1-0. So men's soccer right now 1-3-1 with 2 matches having been canceled. Boy, the schedule has just not done UCF men's soccer any favors the last 2 years. They're now getting ready to start the conference side of the schedule at USF on Saturday at 7 p.m. And then after that, they have one more road game in the conference against SMU next Friday on the 29th before they finally get to open the home season on October the 4th, a Wednesday against Stetson. Can you believe that?
It's just crazy. I'm laughing.
The season starts mid-August, and they're not playing. And it just so worked out that they're not going to play a home regular season game until October the 4th.
This is 2 years in a row for that program. They've had some weird kind of quirks or bad luck with the scheduling, with rainouts, cancellations. I mean, it's just kind of and unfortunately, we talked about it earlier with football, man, about the time off, and was that a concern? And I wasn't as concerned in football, but men's soccer, you need your reps. And, that's tough. It's tough. It's tough not knowing your schedule. Hopefully they can get to a rhythm in a normal, schedule type, and then we can learn more. Honestly, we can learn more because honestly, there's no way of judging this team right now. We can't. I mean, it's just kind of a quirky type of deal. So you have to kind of give them an incomplete here or a pass until we see more games and matches, and we learn more about this team, and they learn about each other.
Yeah. So so eventually, at one point, we will see the home debut of Scott Calabrese for UCF men's soccer, and we'll see Matthias Puzzolo as well. So, but again, that won't be until October. By the way, you can watch that USF game that's coming up on Saturday on USF's website. They have that up there for free. All right. Women's soccer. Now, this to me is an interesting story. Women's soccer right now stands at 4-1 still, having their last 3 games canceled. They were scheduled to go down to FIU Sunday, September 10th, canceled. They were scheduled to play at home Friday against LSU. That got called off. Scheduled to play at FIU Sunday, September 10th, 2 days later. Canceled due to Irma. Scheduled to play at home against Florida Gulf Coast Friday, September 15th. Canceled. They were a little rusty, so they called up Eastern Florida State, which is the former, I think that's the former Brevard Community College, and called them up and said, how about you come on down for Sunday for a scrimmage, beat them 12-0 at the UCF track and soccer complex. It's basically a scrimmage that's not going to count on the record, obviously, just to try and shake some of the rust off. And it was a smart move by Coach Dagenais. They are back in action Thursday night, September 21st, on the American Digital Network, which you can watch on YouTube for free, at Cincinnati. They also have a game on Sunday at East Carolina before they come back home Thursday, September 28th, against Tulsa. This is the part that I think is interesting. 4-1 record right now. They have shot up in the polls despite having their last 3 games canceled. In the United Soccer Coaches poll, UCF is now 14th. Last week, they were 15th. They're just behind California, just ahead of Georgetown. In addition, by the way, still behind North Carolina, who they beat. North Carolina is number 8. Number 1, by the way, right now, UCLA, Amanda Cromwell's team, won at 7-0-1 on the season. With 22 first-place votes ahead of Stanford, who's number 2 with 6 first-place votes. South Carolina, who UCF opened with but lost to 2-0, is standing pat at 3. What I thought was interesting, Eric, was the RPI in women's soccer. UCF right now is 4th in the RPI. It goes South Carolina to the top, followed by Stanford, then Texas, then UCF. And how about that? But when you haven't played in basically 2 weeks, you've had 3 matches canceled in a row, and you just keep shooting up the coaches' rankings and the RPI.
It's called beating North Carolina. That's what it'll do
North
for you.
Carolina. Yeah, that's what beating North Carolina will do for you.
Oh yeah. Look, this is a big game, by the way. Cincinnati's very good.
Yeah.
They've been ranked. This is a big game. I'm going to watch it on the digital network. I agree with you about the scrimmage. I think they needed that.
Yeah, Cincinnati, by the way, RPI number 20 in the country right now. They're actually 1 spot behind UCLA in the RPI. UCLA, even though they're number 1 in the coaches poll, is 19th in the RPI.
Yeah, no, this is a big match. When you look at the American Conference and the contenders, I mean, Memphis, UCF, Cincinnati, maybe even USF is a dark horse. This is a league that I think will get multiple bid league. And this is a big match for UCF on the road. Definitely have concerns about having all this time off. That's why they got that scrimmage in. I think that's one of the main reasons why they did that. And I'm curious to see how they come out on Thursday. And I just hope that this kind of quirky situation with the scheduling, that what's occurred doesn't hurt the momentum that they were building prior to it. That's my concern.
Yeah, and then, but like you said, you got to shake that rust off, and like you said, that's a pretty quick. I would have loved to have seen that if they, I'd rather have a home game if that's going to happen, but the schedule is the schedule. You got to deal with it going up to Cincinnati. It's a good thing they're going up to Cincinnati now before it starts getting cold. That's Absolutely. The other thing I was thinking too.
Sure, no question.
Volleyball. Spent actually, they were up in Arkansas. They picked up an extra match in that Central Arkansas Classic when they were playing Arkansas State, Central Arkansas, and Southern. Picked up an extra match against Oral Roberts. So right now, volleyball, they lost that one 3-1. They split in the Central Arkansas Classic. So right now, volleyball at 7-5. But here's the thing: came home Friday night, 7 p.m. Their home opener against the University of Virginia. It was the first sporting event on UCF's campus since Hurricane Irma, since everything went down, and they just administered a whooping on Virginia. Got the sweep 3-0 on Friday night. Really impressive numbers for UCF throughout this match. It hit 357 in the first, followed by a 444 in the third. Kia Bright with 11 kills and 16 digs in that match. Just a workmanlike performance all the way around. And then they had to come back and play Virginia again because they were originally scheduled to play Ole Miss on Sunday. Ole Miss bailed out, and so UVA said, "Well, we got another match to play. Can we just play you guys on Saturday?" Because they were scheduled to play Ole Miss on Saturday. So UCF said, "All right." Todd Dagenais said, "All right, we'll play you guys again." A few hours later, basically 1 p.m. on Saturday, and you'd think that things would be a little bit quirky in terms of you're playing them again. Who makes the adjustments? UCF sweeps Virginia anyway. 25-19, 25-14, 25-18. So 6 sets in a row over an ACC opponent. The Knights hit 359 in that match. And again, Kia Bright, she's just a machine out there. 11 kills to go with 13 digs this time around. Allie Sable and Christina Fisher added 9 kills each. And the Knights are now 7-5. And I was actually at the Friday night match, Eric. And by the way, 8-1 in blocks for UCF in that second match against Virginia. I was at the Friday night match, that first match, and Todd Dagenais talked post-match about the nerve-wracking week that they had as they were up in Arkansas, kind of waiting the storm out. And then the players, the sort of the senior council, if you will, for UCF, the coaches sort of came together with the players and said, what do you guys want to do? And here's how. This is an interesting story. Here's how all that went down and how they decided to come back to Florida.
The very first thing as the hurricane was coming in was that my wife and Brian's wife went together up to Georgia. Jenny's husband works for a hospital, so he couldn't get away, and so he kind of had to ride it out. And so she was the one more than anything else that was, on pins and needles because, she didn't know how things were going to turn out, which way the eye wall was going to go or anything like that. So that in itself leads to a lot of stress. And yes, we have players, and if you look at the Florida players, we've got the one here from Orlando, but we've got Tampa, we've got Jacksonville, and we've got people that are on coast that were under flood warnings, and we saw in Houston what that does. And so what I really thought was incredible was the team's sense of home. They wanted to get home. And maybe that's parlayed by the fact we've been on the road 3 weeks, I don't know, but there was just a sense of we want to go home. And so on Monday, we found out that our Tuesday flight was canceled. We weren't going to get in on Tuesday. Because originally, knowing the hurricane was coming, we rescheduled for Tuesday. And we found out that we weren't going to be able to get back until Saturday, tomorrow. And so I grabbed the captains, our leadership group, not just the captains, that includes Allie and Jordan Pingle. And I said, what do you guys want to do? These are the options. And to a person, they all said, let's just climb on a bus and go. So we went and found out the rules and regulations of drivers. They can only drive so many hours in such an amount of time. And we found out we had to hire another driver. So 3 hours later, another driver showed up, and we left at 4 o'clock and drove straight through the night. We pulled in at about noon. So we were actually here, with time. I mean, this was on Monday. We got in on Tuesday. So we've been here since Tuesday, whereas a lot of the UCF sports are still stuck out there or just getting back. And so I really feel fortunate that we were able to get our team back into a rhythm, at least of practice, not of class, but of practice. And I think rhythm and routine is so important for a college student, but it's even more important to a highly academic college student, which we're pretty loaded with. They like routine, they like rhythm, they like predictability, and so we wanted to get them back to whatever the new normal was going to be as soon as possible. I couldn't go any farther without saying what a great job Anthony Travel did and our administration and their guidance, and Tammy Manbeck specifically with Anthony Travel, who pulled all these strings and made all this stuff happen with the bus, because that stuff just doesn't happen overnight. This thing happened within hours. And all of a sudden we were on a bus. Actually, we were at Walmart spending about $1,000 in pillows and blankets, but we were on a bus back here, and I think that makes a huge difference. Now, with that being said, to come back here, come in, and we didn't want to do a huge practice on Tuesday after being on the road for 16 hours, but just enough to get everybody loosened up. Wednesday was a pretty hard practice. Thursday was a regular practice, and I thought today we were ready to play. So I think that's a lot of credit to the players that put things behind them. They recover quickly. I think it's a credit to the leadership saying no excuses. Let's suck it up. Let's go out there and play, and let's get better. So I really think this is a tribute to the seniors in the leadership group that have put us in a nice position to be able to rebound from something that's absolutely heart-wrenching in a lot of situations. It wasn't for us, but it was for a lot of other people.
So I can totally understand where the players were coming from, where, Eric, they were 3 consecutive weeks on the road to start the season. And they're finally like, look, can we just go home? Let's just find a way home. We want to get home. And
right.
And they finally they hopped on a bus and drove on down. And by the way, credit as Coach Dagenais mentioned to the support staff as well for pulling that together on short notice. But they were able to get back down, and a little concerned about how crazy things got with that wild week, and you spend that weekend on the bus and everything. And lo and behold, hey, two straight sweeps over Virginia, and you're right back in the thick of it as you head toward conference play, right?
Well, and again, that's another example. Talk about football. Why it's not as simple as, hey, just go play on the road during a hurricane, because there are logistics issues, even after games. How do you get back? And things like that. So that's a pretty unique story to share. You mentioned it. We're in conference play. 20 games, right? Conference? Well, man, 20 games schedule, right? You've seen them up close. The biggest question you have now going into conference is what?
Right now, it's the competition. We know how good this league is right now, and I'm going to take a peek at the American
Wichita
Conference standings.
Wichita State is coming off a win over a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah,
and they're legit. And talking to people that follow the sport much closer than I do, I've been encouraged to go to the Wichita State match, which I believe is the volleyball.
It is
match. So that might be one of the matches I've got circled to go, because they're very legit.
That's on October the 27th, by the way. They're legit, right? I mean, kind of under the radar because men's basketball gets all the attention, and rightfully so. But this volleyball program is tremendous. They beat number 8 Creighton on last weekend in 4 sets. So I think if you go into conference play, Wichita State is the favorite, a strong favorite. Temple is still good. I think UCF feels they could be right in that mix. It's going to be interesting. I mean, everyone's kind of beaten up on it. No one's played a conference match yet. Wichita State right now 8-3, Tulane 11-2. Now you mentioned Jordan Thompson in Cincinnati. They came out with a very tough schedule, but they are off to a bad start. They are 2-10. They're coming in actually on the 24th. As you look at the UCF volleyball schedule coming up, they have a pair of matches this weekend. Friday night, East Carolina, September 22nd, 7 p.m. And they're doing the old Friday night, Sunday afternoon thing. Sunday, September 24th, home against Cincinnati, 1 p.m. is UCF. You can catch both of those matches on UCFnights.tv. But I'm scared of that Cincinnati match because there's that old adage about how about the wounded animal is the one that's most dangerous.
Well, it's funny because I'm actually looking at their stats, because when you told me that record, I was kind of like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
I'm looking at their stats. Which player is missing from the stats?
Jordan Thompson.
Yep.
Yeah.
That could give you a reason of why you're struggling.
This is unconfirmed on my part, but I was actually able to dig up something here. It says that she is, this is according to Volley Talk, that in the broadcast of their game against Kentucky, their match against Kentucky, I should say, she's out for the season due to a freak injury when playing defense, requires Tommy John surgery.
No.
So,
wow.
So, yeah. I mean, now,
No,
I'm used to heartbreaking news about knees and stuff, right? Which we've seen that all too many times. A freak elbow or a freak rotator cuff injury playing defense, requiring Tommy John. That stinks, and it stinks for Jordan because she's not just an outstanding player, but a great representative of the conference. And obviously, we wish her well and getting better. But geez, Louise, I mean, that's man, oh man.
It's bad for the game. I hate it for her. Obviously, that's a great future. Hopefully, she can bounce back from that. It's bad for it's bad for the sport. I mean, regardless of who you root for and all that, you like to see the best. And I got to call my first volleyball match for the digital network a couple years ago with Cincinnati against UCF, and she's fun to watch. She's impressive to watch. Erin Campbell, who we both know very well, former UCF great, feels she's an All-American type, and I agreed. She led them to the NCAA tournament, and that's significant, Jeff, with that news that you just broke, because explain this to the audience that may not be aware. That's not somebody it's not like other sports where you have other players that could step in right away and fit. The position that she plays is not easy to be replaceable. It's not easy to fix. Just like, let's just bring in the backup. That is a significant loss, and Cincinnati has talent around her, but man, that is a huge blow, and it explains why they're struggling. Right.
And, like I said, they may have been totally deflating for them, but there's a pretty well coached Cincinnati team too. So they're probably going to be. They're not going to be an easy out. That's for sure.
That's a tough loss. I mean, that's a tough loss. I mean, we saw that with UCF with Kia Bright. What was it? The year after they won the American Conference title.
Yeah.
The fortunate thing for UCF that year in 2015 is, they still had some good players. Jayla Harvey stepped up and everything, but they weren't as good as 2014 in part because Kia Bright was out for the year, which that's tough to replace.
Yeah. And, looking at their stats from last year, in 118 sets, Jordan Thompson averaged almost 5 kills a set, which is out of this world pretty much. So, postseason accolades and whatnot. So, like I said, that's a tough blow for Cincinnati.
Well, that makes, with that news now, I'm actually familiar with that volleyball site you mentioned. Actually, that company, I believe they're owned by the same people that own the softball site I work for. But that's all the story.
Might be true.
That's a huge story because I had Cincinnati as the biggest threat to Wichita State, certainly an NCAA tournament team going into the year. With that out of the picture, with respect to the coaching staff and the players on that team, with Jordan Thompson out, that's a huge deal. I think it makes Wichita State even a stronger favorite in the league, and it does open the door for UCF and Temple and to challenge Wichita State and get to maybe that's even at worst that second spot or third spot. And the reason why I think that's important, you want to be at the best position possible if you don't win the regular season title to get an at-large bid, and that's what's going to be emphasized here for UCF and others starting this with conference play here, because it's going to be a Donnybrook here.
Yeah. So that's key to watch here this weekend. And again, conference schedule getting underway. This is where the real meat of it happens. 20 conference matches this season for UCF volleyball, starting with.
Do you like that? Do you like that?
I love it. I love the fact that we play home and home.
Okay.
I think I wish every sport did that. Now I know that logistically it would be pretty tough for baseball in particular. I don't think they play home and home baseball. I think they only play some. I know that in softball they don't, and in soccer they don't. Now, if one day we get that change to the soccer schedule that some of the coaches have been lobbying for, then certainly maybe that might be an option. But I like the fact that we do play everybody twice in volleyball. That's having Wichita State in there does. Actually, people thought that would complicate it a little bit. Really didn't, because Wichita is travel partners with Memphis, and there's kind of that Memphis, Tulsa, SMU sort of trip. And because Houston and Tulane, people say, well, why aren't SMU and Houston travel partners? Well, it's because Houston and Tulane are actually travel partners. They're closer together than Dallas.
I do think there's some questions that are legitimate about the travel schedule, and I don't know if we'll get into it as deep in this episode. Maybe we'll do it in a future episode. And I do want to talk to Coach Dagenais about it, because I think, for example, I think Wichita State and Tulsa should be the travel partners, and I think they should tweak some things to make it easier on the student athletes. Like, why not have Memphis and Tulane be travel partners, and just tweak it that way? And why do we have to stick with what it is? Because there's actually a part in the UCF schedule, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, where UCF plays at Tulsa, I believe, on a Sunday, come back home, only to then go to Wichita State the following Friday, or it might be vice versa. I don't remember.
It's the opposite way. It's Sunday, October 1st at Wichita, and then Friday, October the 6th at Tulsa.
Yeah. And I just, I'm kind of head scratching over that. Why not just have Wichita State and Tulsa? And listen, I've traveled to Tulsa multiple times. It's not easy to travel up there. And I can't imagine it's easy to travel to Wichita State, but I do know there's bus trips a distance between Wichita and Tulsa, and talking to people that have been up there. I've talked to Associate Coach Maurer about that. She's obviously coached in the Missouri Valley Conference about that. So to me, from a student-athlete standpoint, why not have Wichita State and Tulsa as travel partners? You could have Memphis and Tulane as travel partners, because Memphis to New Orleans is an easy flight. And you have Houston, SMU, as you mentioned, from that stuff, where I just think it's a lot easier from a budget standpoint and from a student-athlete travel experience standpoint, if they can just tweak it that way instead of kind of how the way they have it. But
Wichita to Tulsa, by the way, is a 2-hour 42-minute drive.
Right,
and you can fly into Oklahoma City and get to either one rather easily.
Exactly. So why not? I think that's something that the league should look into. I actually do intend on talking to Coach Dagenais about that next time I see him, because I was looking at that, and for some reason I'm a dork when it comes to this kind of stuff. Partly because partly I've traveled with teams. I've traveled with softball for a decade, so I know. Keep in mind, when we're talking volleyball, soccer, these are all commercial flights. There's no charter here like football or men's basketball.
Right.
So, and I've seen the challenges that comes with traveling on commercial with a team.
Not to mention the cost of gas with a bus ride and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right. And I just, when I looked at this volleyball schedule, I'm like, wow, this seems a little bit more complicated than it really should be. You're asking UCF to make 2 trips up that area now, back to back. I mean, that's not fun. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I know other people are in charge of it. Like I said, I intend on asking Coach Dagenais that when I talk to him, because I'm curious if coaches have looked into this and what they thought about this, because I think this could help everybody, and not just and just from a scheduling standpoint and from a travel standpoint, from a budget standpoint. I just think there's some changes that need to be done to that. But
yeah, it's going to be. I do wonder if they don't revisit that later on. I think probably in the off season. It'll be up to the coaches again to sort of sort all that out. But if I was in Coach Dagenais' seat, I'm sure that I'm sure that he's probably done this, I would certainly lobby for Tulsa and Wichita to be on the same bracket as travel
Doesn't it
partners.
just make sense? I mean, it just seems to me there's nothing you can do about East Carolina and Connecticut. There's nothing that is what it is. You obviously have UCF and USF as travel partners. To me, with Wichita State arrival, Tulsa, Wichita State, I think all the teams would benefit from that. And as I mentioned, and we'll see, maybe they'll adjust it. Now, what I don't know, and that's why I want to talk to them about, maybe there's some prearranged agreements that it makes this easier. Maybe there's deals that the conference or the schools have with, travel partners or travel companies that make this kind of, better. Who knows? That's kind of one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to finding out.
All right. That is a good thing that maybe we'll get the chance to ask Todd this weekend when we are.
If you want to ask him, I will, but I'm in Maryland. But feel free to ask him. Tell him I asked this question. Eric Lopez wants to know. He's obsessed with flying and concerned about the travel mileage.
Sounds good. I'll be sure to. I'll put that on. I'll put that on the docket. All right, let's wrap this thing up here. Look, Elo, obviously you're going to be in Maryland. Tell us what you're going to be up to when you head up to the DMV, so people can follow you up there.
Follow me on Twitter on Eric Lopez Elo. I'll be obviously spending time with the family, but then I'll be covering the game on Saturday. And you're
going to be live blogging with us, with me and Murph, right?
Oh, boy. That's right. I'll be live blogging. I'll try to log in there. I'll be bugging Jeff. I'll be calling him names. It'll be great entertainment. And I'll try to obviously take some photos and maybe shoot some video, whether it be Facebook Live or Periscope. I haven't figured that out yet, but try to get people kind of an idea of what's it like to be there maybe before the game when I'm on the field, or maybe halftime or after the game. I will go by feel. We'll go by feel and see how things are, but that's kind of my intentions, and hope to have a good time. And hopefully, I know that a lot of people are making the trip. I know, in fact, Nightline will be doing their post-game show from there. So just hope for everybody to have a good time. But, yeah, look for Eric Lopez-Elo for the latest on that. That's what's really on my on the forefront for me.
All right, and you'll be live blogging with us on blackandgoldbanneret.com for the game. Remember, a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday against Maryland and FS1. Hit up blackandgoldbanneret.com. Have us open on your laptop there. We'll be talking about the game as it happens throughout. And Eric, you'll be in the post in the press box in College Park as well, giving us some insight on some of the things we don't see. Of course, don't forget to hit us up on our Facebook page, Black and Gold Banneret, as well there on Facebook.com. We are at UCF_Banneret. I am at Jeff_Sharon. Eric, as he mentioned, is at Eric Lopez-Elo. You can download this podcast anytime you want on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Tune In. Lopez, thanks again, brother. Have a safe trip up to Maryland. I'll be talking to you, all right?
Appreciate it, man. Have a good time.
And thanks to you for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. We will see you on our live blog Saturday for UCF and Maryland. Take it easy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.